ever since the airstrike from Israel and then the retaliation by Iran, that's all my Instagram feed has been, mainly Christians bickering with each other over the verse in Genesis about blessing Israel, you'll be cursed, and it's like that's all that pops up with my Instagram feed. It's like there's nothing about the bill, there's nothing about LA. That's pretty much disappeared from my Instagram cycle, surprisingly. Um, that's all. That's all. And of course, the Tucker Carlson Ted Cruz interview. That's been making the cycle on Instagram and YouTube
Well,
too.
big tech is working with the mainstream media. I think you know it and I know it.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's like as a kid, we were told by the older generation, especially during the global war on terror, which you and I grew up. We're post 9/11 kids. We were alive for 9/11, but we weren't old enough to remember it happening. We grew up with the people talking about it and remembering it. Watching a 20+ year war on terror in the Middle East happen. With we're sitting here as kids. We're like, ooh, I can't wait to get old enough to fight. And then you get in your teenage years, and you're like, no, no, we need to get out of there.
Yep,
I've met
I
so
agree.
many guys, especially in college. I've met so many guys that have served, who've had people in their family serve, and I've never thought I'd see a nihilistic viewpoint on armed service because we're the most patriotic country in the world. We have the best stuff, the best military. We will go out and willingly do anything for anybody else that needs help. Not anymore. People are going to find out with these boomers. I hate using that term, but it is these boomers. These post Vietnam Korea War era people, which is very surprising that they're calling for war when half of those people were the hippies that were getting arrested at colleges, abusing and attacking National Guard recruitment offices, Marine recruiting offices, Army recruiting offices. Those were the heavy anti-war people when we were fighting the communists,
Yeah, and then
who actually,
they were
yeah,
abusing our
it's
troops
like,
when they got home too.
yeah. We're talking about we're talking about people that probably spit on Marines and Army personnel when they arrived back home at the airports.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they want us to go to war again in the desert. They want us to keep fighting in the desert. But when we were in a war that we actually had business fighting because we went there as guests of the Vietnam people, we went there to be military advisors and military advisors only. Terroristic Viet Cong people snuck onto our base, killed 15 of our non combatant military advisors who were not fighting. They were not killing Vietnamese. They were simply training the ARVN to protect their country. They get killed by militant insurgents who basically are like, we will have one Vietnam and it will be under communist dictatorship. You know, granted that those some of the stuff that happened in Vietnam was shouldn't have done. We fought a very bad war, but it was a war of attrition, so it's not really you're not there for territories. Like people don't seem to understand that we went from war of territory. World War One, World War Two. It was about how much territory you took back from the enemy and held versus Vietnam, Korea, and now the global war on terror, a war of attritions, where it's like I may lose 20,000 of my people, but I killed 50,000 plus of you, so I'm still the victor because I wiped out more of you than what you killed of me. And people also forget they signed the peace treaty in 1970. 5 years later, they roll their tanks in and take over Saigon very peacefully because Congress basically said, well, we made promises to keep, funding the, South Vietnamese military, but you know what? We're sick of war. We're gonna focus on, stuff here, so we're not gonna send those funds out. So underfunded military. It was a military that was basically embedded with Viet Cong sympathizers at that point. So we just, we got all our people out. No, no more Americans were killed in Vietnam, but they took it over. And if you actually look at the country now versus then, and well, actually look at it when we pulled out, they almost went bankrupt. We pulled American businesses out of there. We pulled Americans out of Vietnam. The country almost went bankrupt when it first turned communistic. They are now a pseudo-communistic, democratic, country now because they almost killed their economy with communism. Same thing with with North Korea. Look at their situation. But we're going to focus on the Middle East for some reason. Oil, but we've never, like, you and I've never seen oil. We're still paying $2.50 to $3 a gallon of gas, but we got to go fight in the Middle East again. And not only are we fighting, they're wanting us to fight in the Middle East. It's the second biggest importer and exporter of oil. Saudi Arabia is the number one in the Middle East. Iran's the number two. We've yet to ever have a conflict with Saudi Arabia, even though they funded Al Qaeda. They funded the people that attacked us on 9/11. Bin Laden was on the board of multiple companies in Saudi Arabia. His dad was one of the richest people in Saudi Arabia. But we ended up fighting in Iraq. We ended up fighting in Afghanistan. As an adult, it makes no sense to me. And then to go even further, go do a deep dive on YouTube. You can find an old clip of our supposed best friend in the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu, telling us that if we topple Saddam Hussein, the Middle East is going to be a paradise. It's not. It is the most destabilized region in the entire world. Africa makes it, like, they make Africa look sane. Africa still has some of the worst, like, tribalistic warfare going on. Somalia is a failed state ever since the Black Hawk Down incident. There's multiple areas in Africa that are basically not even third world countries; they're fourth world countries. They're so poor, but we got to go fight in the desert again.
It's funny that you say that in terms of fourth world countries, not even third world, because usually third world are also now called, on the politically correct term, developing nations. And what you're saying is, well, show me the development. Like, it's not even developing.
Well, go on. Like, all you gotta do is go on YouTube and look up Mr. Beast water wells. He built those things within like a year. Left technicians there to help show the populace how to maintain them. They've already taken them apart and scrapped them.
Right.
So it's like, what else are you supposed to do to help these tribes, these people that aren't living in big these big urban environments? That they're living very rural compared to what we have with our cities. Our big our rural areas are still nowhere rural compared to some of these countries out in Africa, Middle East, and even South America makes Africa is better off than Africa. Brazil's still one of the poorest countries in the world, and they live in favelas for the most part, which are interconnected shacks. They're apartments. They're really shacks. They got 10 roofs and everything. But then you go to the tourist areas, and it's like very well developed. You go to Rio de Janeiro and stay near the beach areas, hotels galore, shops, restaurants. But you go further into Brazil, it's not the same. Mexico. You stay in the tourist areas of Mexico, it's beautiful. Great places, friendly people. But you go to the actual like Mexican areas, like where the actual people are, it's terrible. And all of them have very, very much the same things in common. Corrupt government, cartels, drugs. So if we're going to spend our time fighting outside of America, I think I'd rather go help our neighbors down in the below the border. I'd rather fight the cartels than go fight in the desert. And most of my guys that I know that are former military, that are they would put on the uniform again if they needed to, they want to go fight the cartels because that is the most important. It's like, I'm not going to go fight for a nation state that basically has demanded that, well, we're Jewish, so you have to protect us because you're the United States of America. You exist only for us. That's literally what Ted Cruz said in his interview with Tucker Carlson, was that America is basically only around to protect the interest of Israel. That guy needs to be impeached. Like Ted Cruz needs to be immediately taken out of office because it was
a very revealing. Yeah, it was a very revealing conversation. Pivoting slightly, I think it's interesting because there's actually a lot of talk about this back in the 2024 election. I think DeSantis brought it up in terms of what you just said about fighting cartels. It sounds like to me, and I want to make sure that we're clear that you favor at least some amount of military intervention in either Mexico or Central America in terms of fighting the cartels. I've had the position that we need to fight the cartels within the continental United States a lot harder, definitely, but I don't know if I favor going into either Mexico or into Central America, because to me, it's not that I think, oh, that's racist or colonialist. It's like, no, I don't think we need to be solving their problems for them. I really think that we basically need to say to them, hey, fix your mess. We're not going to fix your mess for you. We are going to fix our mess. We're going to defend our border and fight this war within our border. And maybe you agree with that, but again, I want to be clear. So do you favor intervening in any capacity outside of the United States and Mexico or Central America? And if
I
so, why?
I do, but it's mainly because if you trace back a lot of the cartels and how big they've gotten over the years, it's our fault. Like, not Americans' fault, it's our government's fault. Look at the 60s. Look at the amount of CIA that went down to Mexico and gave them, helped them build up their drug empires in return for money that was being laundered to fund our CIA operations in Vietnam. So it's like, in my opinion, a lot of the problems we have in other countries, our government has kind of helped create. They were
Sure.
there. I'm not saying that we created the cartels on purpose. I'm saying they were there, but they wouldn't be as big as they are now if our government hadn't been using them to get what they wanted. The CIA and the FBI are the biggest problems in our government. We've got we have corrupt local officials, corrupt officials that in the Senate and the House. But if we were to terminate the NSA, if we were to terminate the FBI and terminate the CIA now and rebuild them, or just find a new way to go with we have military intelligence. Why do we need four different branches of intelligence? We have Department of Homeland Security, we have the CIA, we have the FBI, and then you have the Joint Chiefs of Staff, just regular like naval intelligence, army intelligence. Why do we need 4 to 6 different branches of intelligence when they could all be under one big department and able to do everything? Because the whole thing is the FBI is only able to operate within the continental United States, and the CIA is only allowed to operate outside the United States. They both don't stick to that. The FBI operates with Interpol outside of the United States jurisdiction on multiple accounts. The CIA operates all the time inside the continental United States. They just cover it up, or they pretend to be they say it's a Homeland Security operation. They say it's an FBI operation. No, it's a joint operation with the CIA, and there's CIA officers embedded with the FBI and the DHS people. So
They're
it's like they
inside the
don't.
state governments. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan at all of Jesse Ventura. I used to be. I look back and I cringe. But one thing he said shortly after becoming a governor is that when he was governor of Minnesota, there was a CIA employee that he was informed about and was told, oh, by the way, yeah, you can't fire him. And he was like, I'm the governor of the state. What are you talking about? And they said, no, he's unfireable. He reports back to Langley, and that's a complete no-go. So think about that, people. Think about that there is someone in your state, whether it's in South Carolina, Texas, California, wherever, they work for the CIA and they report back to someone in Langley. And for reasons we don't really understand or know about, but they should be accountable to the American people, and that's a problem. So yeah, I agree with you. They're operating within the United States, which is not supposed to be their territory. So you're
yeah,
right.
and not only that, it's like look at what they've interfered with. You
Right.
look a couple years, about 10, 13 years ago, 12 years ago, Benghazi, 2013. What made that escalate into a worse situation? The CIA station chief not allowing our assets to go in and help our ambassador. Our ambassador was basically killed by his own government because they were so afraid of a CIA base being discovered in that country that they wouldn't send highly trained special forces guys to go take out these guys, get our ambassador out of there, get him back to our CIA headquarters, and extract everybody. That was the biggest government failure of modern history outside of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. But before the withdrawal from Afghanistan, our biggest flop as military and spycraft was Benghazi. That was
Well
a
said.
13-hour firefight that didn't have to happen if we had had better response. But the whole idea was we can't be exposed as having a CIA base in this country. We got to use local assets. Well, the local assets don't trust you. The local assets are only there to make money.
Thank you for watching this video here on the Fog and the Whirlwind. Do me one big favor and press the like button. It helps everything out in the algorithm a lot. Also, make sure you are following me here on YouTube, Rumble, or X, wherever it is that you're watching this video. Also, do me another favor and make sure you are following me. Go to thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. A big reason why I do what I do here is because of my paid supporters. So consider becoming a paid supporter and get exclusive content and admission into the private Supporters of the Fog and the Whirlwind group chat. Thank you very much for your support.